The accusation hung in the air, heavy as stone. Treason. Justice Clarence Thomas, his face an unreadable mask carved from granite, had just uttered the word, aimed directly at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Treason. Right here. Cameras rolling, broadcasting live to over 22 million stunned Americans. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with shock, with disbelief, with a sudden, terrifying weight of history being made, or perhaps unmade. Close up on Jasmine Crockett. She stands alone at the defendant's table, composed, but a storm flickers deep in her eyes. No lawyers flanked her. No aides whispered frantically in her ear. Just Jasmine. Her tailored navy suit was armor, her tightly pinned hair, control. She hadn't flinched. Not when Thomas's voice, deep and resonant, delivered the charge like a death sentence, willfully withheld military intelligence. Operation Hollow River. Treason against the United States. The courtroom erupted in a strangled gasp. Pens clattered. Someone in the press section muttered, "What the hell?" loud enough for the mics to pick up. Then came a ripple of nervous, incredulous laughter, the kind that escapes when the unthinkable happens. Smirks bloomed on the faces of rivals in the gallery. An aide in the back actually pumped a fist under the table. They smelled blood. They saw a career immolating, live on air. But Jasmine didn't crumble. She didn't shout. Slowly, deliberately, her chair scraping faintly against the marble floor, she rose. Her hands rested flat on the table. She looked directly at the most powerful judge in the land, her voice low, steady, cutting through the noise. "Are you sure?" she asked, the question echoing in the sudden, dead silence. "You want this?" It wasn't defiance. It wasn't fear. It was certainty, a chilling certainty that froze a room. Thomas faltered, just for a millisecond. His lips parted. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of calculation replacing the judicial mask. He sensed it then. They all did. Jasmine Crockett hadn't walked into a trial. She'd walked into a reckoning. And she hadn't come empty-handed. Focus on Crockett's hands as she opens her worn, brown leather briefcase. The soft click of the latches unnaturally loud. All eyes were riveted on that briefcase. What defense could she possibly mount alone? What last-ditch legal trick? But what she pulled out wasn't a stack of legal documents. It wasn't Exhibit A. It was a letter. Camera slowly zooms on the letter as she holds it. Show its texture. Folded, edges curled, dog-eared, a faded fingerprint, a coffee stain, a tear taped with care. A single, time-worn, crumpled letter. The kind clutched tightly through sleepless nights, tear-stained, read and reread until the paper thinned. It felt sacred, heavy. "This," Jasmine said, her voice quiet but filling the cavernous room, "is not evidence." She held it gently, reverently. "This is a truth we were never meant to see." The atmosphere shifted. The political theater vanished, replaced by a hushed, almost holy stillness. As Jasmine carefully unfolded the fragile paper, every crease seeming to hold a breath, she began to read. "My name is Mara Wilkins. I am the mother of Private First Class Darius Wilkins." Her voice was even, measured, yet beneath it pulsed the rhythm of borrowed grief. "He was my only child. He died 2 years ago in an operation the Army told me nothing about." A shiver went through the crowd. Reporters stopped typing. Senators leaned forward, their faces suddenly unguarded. "They came to my door with a flag and 3 uniformed men." Jasmine continued, reading Mara's words. "They called him a hero, said he served with honor. But they never told me how he died. They never told me why." The polite discomfort in the gallery deepened. I asked questions. They said classified. I begged. They said national security. But when I closed his bedroom door that night, I knew they were hiding something. Jasmine's voice held steady, drawing strength from the ink on the page. For months, I couldn't sleep. I started dreaming about him, hear his footsteps on the stairs, smell his shampoo, think I heard him laugh, just for a second, then remember. Her voice caught, almost imperceptibly, on the last word. He wasn't coming back. That simple, devastating line shattered the remaining composure in the room. Soft sniffles broke the silence. A retired Navy veteran on the jury pressed a thumb hard into the corner of his eye, staring intently at the floor. Even the cynics, the ones who come for the spectacle, looked down, away, anywhere but at Jasmine or the letter. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was about a mother's unanswered agony. "I'm not writing this because I want someone punished," Jasmine read, the final words landing with quiet finality. "I'm writing because I want someone, anyone, to tell the truth. To say my son mattered, that his life wasn't just a statistic buried in redacted reports." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle, letting the silence scream. When she looked up, her eyes swept across a courtroom transformed. Smugness, gone. Scoffing, gone. The jurors sat frozen, mouths slightly agape. The court reporter's fingers hovered uselessly over the keys. Justice Thomas's hands, resting on the bench, trembled slightly. Without raising her voice, without citing a single statute, Jasmine had done the impossible. She had made them feel, not for her, but for a mother they'd never met, for a son they'd never know. She gently folded the letter, placing it on the table like a fragile relic. Her hands, steady moments before, were still now, and in that profound stillness, the millions watching began to understand. This wasn't a defense. It was an unveiling. Sound of the briefcase latch clicking open again. The mood shifts, the grief remains, but now there's an edge of anticipation, of steel. The letter had cracked the foundation. Now, Jasmine Crockett brought the hammer. She lifted out a stack of government documents. Cold, official, stamped top secret, Operation Hollow River. The seals were broken, the redaction seemingly lifted. "I'm entering these into the public record," she announced, her voice regaining its sharp edge. "Unsealed 7 days ago." A few scoffs returned, whispers of grandstanding political theater. Jasmine ignored them, holding up the first page. The bold black header glared under the courtroom lights. Below it, timestamps, locations, mission protocols, and lines of text where black boxes used to be. She flipped to a second page. "This report," she stated, her finger tracing a line, "was filed 48 hours after Darius Wilkins was declared dead." She read the revealed text aloud, each word a drop of ice water. Subject showing signs of life during extraction. Breathing shallow. Field medic notified. No follow-up recorded. A beat of silence. Then another. The implication landed like a physical blow. He was alive. The nervous laughter died completely. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't fog of war. This felt like erasure. A juror gasped, hand flying to her mouth. The court clerk stared at the document as if it boned. Jasmine laid out another page. Logistics. Signatures from a private military contractor, Strat Defense. Missing medical equipment. An unlogged field kit. And then the final piece of paper from the briefcase. Not a document. A photograph. Grainy, grayscale, printed from a digital file, but unmistakable. 2 men at a restaurant table in Georgetown, wine glasses raised and a toast. Justice Clarence Thomas and Leonard Kenner, CEO of Strat Defense. The contractor linked to Operation Hollow River. The dinner took place 8 months ago. Focus on Thomas's reaction. A slight shift. The mask cracks. Not anger. Not yet. Just exposure. A pin dropping would have echoed. The air evacuated the room. This wasn't politics anymore. This was a direct, visual link between the judge presiding over the case and the corporate entity potentially involved in the death and the cover-up of Darius Wilkins. Before the shock could fully register, before Thomas could react, the doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open again. Slowly, deliberately, a small, elderly woman with tightly curled gray hair made her way down the aisle, leaning heavily on a cane. Eloise Wilkins, Darius's grandmother, Mara's mother. The camera follows her slow, determined walk. Her face shows immense grief, but also unbreakable resolve. She didn't look frail. She looked forged in sorrow. Steel ran through her spine. Jasmine stepped aside from the witness area, a flicker of deep empathy crossing her face. Eloise didn't wait for permission. She adjusted the microphone, her small hand steady, and looked directly at Clarence Thomas. Her eyes held the unbearable weight of 2 graves. "I buried my daughter," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the resonance of profound loss. Mara Wilkins had died 6 months after her son, succumbing to what the doctors called a broken heart. And then I buried my grandson. The courtroom held its breath. The only thing I've ever wanted, Eloise continued, her voice trembling slightly now, not with weakness, but with a sheer effort of speaking her truth, is to know what happened. Not the letter, not the news, what really happened. She reached into her purse, pulling out a worn photo. Darius, smiling in his uniform, next to a beat-up car with a proud Army Mom sticker. He loved that car, she whispered, holding it up, her hand shaking. Said he'd fix it up when he came home. A pause, thick with unshed tears. He never came home. Next, a woman with short auburn hair and tired eyes took the stand. Susan Hale, former Army nurse. Her record was spotless, but her face was etched with a burden of memory. I was on duty the night Private Wilkins were brought in, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Classified. No questions. Under control. That's what they told us. She pressed her palms together. But I saw him. Her voice cracked. He was still breathing. A collective intake of breath. He looked right at me, Susan continued, tears finally escaping, tracing paths down her cheeks. He kept saying, "Tell my mama I'm okay." Over and over, like if he said it enough, someone would make it true. Her lips trembled. No one answered him. He died alone. A journalist lowered her camera, covering her mouth. A juror gripped the armrest, knuckles white. This wasn't testimony. It was confession, years overdue. Then Jasmine nodded to a technician. The lights dimmed fractionally. A speaker crackled. Static, then a voice. Cold, calculated, unmistakably Clarence Thomas. If the mother pushes too hard, leaks something about a protocol violation, it'll shut the story down before it spreads. One sentence, detonating in the silence, a sharp inhale from the gallery, the clatter of a dropped pen. The stenographer flinched. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't hearsay. It was a judge, caught on tape, strategizing the burial of a mother's search for truth. Thomas sat rigid, his jaw clenched tighter than ever. His gaze finally dropped, not in shame perhaps, but in the quiet, chilling realization. The game was over. The wound was open. And the nation was watching it bleed. What could possibly come next? Everyone braced for Jasmine's closing argument, the final, fiery summation. But she didn't speak. Instead, she turned, walked to the side of the room, and picked up something that had sat unnoticed against the wall. A plain, wooden kitchen chair. Battered, simple, the kind found in countless American homes. Slow, deliberate walk as she carries the chair to the front, placing it beside the witness stand. She placed it gently, resting one hand on its worn back. This, she said, her voice soft, utterly devoid of performance, belonged to Darius. The air thickened again, but differently. His grandmother gave it to me, Jasmine continued, her hand tracing the smooth wood. She said, this is where he sat every night for dinner, where he told us he was enlisting. The last place he locked before he left. Her gaze swept the room. It's just wood, just a chair, but it's been empty for 2 years. A reminder of what silence costs. She said nothing more. The empty chair screamed. It spoke of loss, of absence, of a life erased, of truth denied. It was more powerful than any legal argument. And then, the smallest sound, tiny footsteps. From the gallery, a little boy, no older than 9, emerged, clutching something in his small hands. He walked steadily down the aisle, his eyes fixed on Jasmine. She knelt. He hesitated, then opened his hands. Inside lay a single, scratched military medal. Its ribbon frayed, the metal worn smooth. My big brother's name was James. The boy whispered, his voice barely audible. He died 2 years ago. 2. Nobody ever told us why. He looked from the medal to Jasmine's face. But you told the truth. And Jasmine Crockett, who had faced down treason charges, a hostile judge, and the way to conspiracy without shedding a tear, finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she accepted the small, heavy metal like it was the most precious thing on earth. She didn't hide them. She didn't apologize. She cried for Darius, for James, for the boy, for the truth spoken aloud in a place built for obfuscation. The fortress had fallen, not to anger, but to simple, devastating human honesty. Transition to scene outside the courthouse. A massive, silent crowd. Hours later, Jasmine stepped onto the courthouse steps. Thousands waited, not shouting, not protesting, waiting. Mothers held framed photos of children in uniform. Veterans stood stoic, medals gleaming faintly. Children held signs. Tell the truth. His life mattered. We're still waiting. A profound, pulsing silence held them all. They hadn't come to rage. They'd come to witness. Jasmine, holding the folded letter and the small, tarnished medal, walked down the steps. People wept openly. A man removed his cap, holding it over his heart. The crowd parted for her, not with deference to power, but with respect for the painful truth she carried. Memory, awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. That evening, quietly, without fanfare, a notice was filed. Justice Clarence Thomas had stepped down. No statement, no press conference. Just an administrative update and the distant sound of a heavy door closing. It wasn't just a resignation. It felt like a surrender, not to politics, but to the undeniable weight of truth revealed. Transition to Arlington National Cemetery. A new, simple black granite wall. 3 days later, under a quiet dawn sky at Arlington, a new memorial stood. No ranks, no titles, just names. Names rescued from redaction. The forgotten, Darius Wilkins. James. Hundreds more. Flowers lay at the base. Notes tucked under stones. You were never invisible to us. Your name lives now. I'm sorry it took this long. Jasmine visited briefly, tracing Darius's name with her fingertips before turning away. His name, finally spoken, finally seen, said enough. The silence, for the first time, felt clean. Final scene, Jasmine on her porch, morning sun. Her young niece Avery sits beside her. Days passed. The storm of media and politics began to subside. Jasmine sat barefoot on her porch, the early sun warm. Her 6-year-old niece, Avery, swung her legs beside her, holding a plastic bowl. Auntie Jasmine, Avery said suddenly, looking up with serious eyes. Can we bake cookies? Jasmine smiled faintly. Cookies? For who? For the soldiers in heaven, Avery said earnestly. You said some didn't have anyone. Maybe we could send them cookies, just so they know we remember. Jasmine's throat tightened. She pulled her niece close. Yes, baby, she whispered, her voice thick. Every single one. Later, as the smell of baking cookies filled the house, Jasmine found a letter taped to her front door. Handwritten, shaky cursive. Eloise Wilkins. She unfolded it gently. You brought my grandson home. Not with a casket, but with truth. That's more than the government ever gave me. Thank you, Eloise. Just that. Nothing more was needed. Jasmine pressed the note to her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed. The breeze sighed through the trees. Avery called out that the cookies were burning. Jasmine laughed, wiping a tear with her sleeve. It wasn't a perfect ending. Justice rarely is. But it was a beginning, a reckoning, a reminder. Justice doesn't always wear a robe or live behind marble walls. Sometimes it arrives carrying a worn letter, an empty chair, a child's medal. Sometimes it's simply the courage to speak the names of the forgotten, to insist that every life matters, and to refuse to let silence win. The most powerful truths aren't shouted. They resonate in the quiet spaces where conscience finally awakens. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for dramatic and educational purposes. While it draws inspiration from real themes and public figures, all characters, including Jasmine Crockett and Clarence Thomas, as depicted here, are entirely fictionalized. They do not represent the real-life individuals, their actions, beliefs, or reputations in any way. Any resemblance to real events or persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell.